2 years ago, my youngest daughter woke up with marks on her neck that looked like vampire bites. We didn't know exactly what to do, but she did experience some issues for about 2 weeks. She couldn't stand light. She slept all day. She had all the symptoms of the typical vampire ways, and we thought it was maybe her imagination. We couldn't quite figure it out. We tried everything. We called a doctor. We investigated. These marks just appeared on her neck out of nowhere. The bites lasted on her neck, like they slowly fade. They were a typical bite. They were like a bite that had healed, but it was there. Like one night it wasn't, the next morning it was, but it took about a month for the bites to fade. And we thought it was an isolated incident. We were checking everybody else's neck in the house. It was fine. About a month later, my daughter looked down at her ankle. Same exact bite. And they were faded as if she was bitten the same time as my youngest daughter was bitten. We just didn't notice it. Same size, same dimension apart, same size, everything the same except a different part of her body. When this first started, we all lived in the same house. Me and my 4 children and my son-in-law. We all lived in the same house. And this happened over a span over 2 years. So the next year, by this time, my daughter and her fiance had moved out. So a few months later, my daughter called me. She said, "Mom, the bites are back. This time, they're on my arm." And she had a bite on her arm, same size bites, same dimension apart, everything the same, just now on her arm. But the bite was changing, and it was not going away, as if she was being bitten in the same spot multiple times. And even the bite started to even like I don't know, like spread as if she was being bitten over and over again in the same spot. Didn't know what to do. And she says, "Okay, I've been bitten, Tajay's been bitten, now Keenan's being bitten." And I'm like, what do you mean? So she sends me this video of the bites, on very obvious bites, same size, same dimension apart, on her fiance's neck. So now I'm confused. Okay, so I'm like, okay, so this is not just my children. Now I'm really like, I'm seeking out paranormal experts. I'm emailing people. I'm reaching out to, even famous paranormal, trying to figure out, hey, psychics, everybody. Hey, can somebody tell me something? Because this is getting ridiculous. And now the vampire, it was a vampire, started really biting Keenan. So at one point, Keenan had bites, just bites, all over his neck. Like, and he wasn't trying to hide it. Like he was very obvious. My children and I, we experienced the paranormal. This is not the first time. So I'm trying to figure this out. I'm trying to understand. I'm trying, we're not freaking out. Everybody stay calm. So I reached out to one person, and they were like, "Oh, it's aliens tracking your bloodline." So if you read your history, many believe that the human race was altered. We weren't created by aliens, but our bodies have been altered by aliens. Like the pyramids and all that stuff was supposedly built by humans, but we were so smart that they suppressed. There's a DNA strand in us that's blocked. And supposedly that's the strand that opens up the other parts of our brain. I don't know. Anyway, so they're saying, oh, when so-called the world's about to end, these aliens coming back for a select few. So maybe it's aliens tracking your bloodline. I'm like, okay. Then the last most sense I heard was a psychic. She's a well-known, she's psychic around the world. I got in touch with her on Facebook, and I sent her a bunch of messages. She responded, and she said, well, let me meditate and let me see if I can find out what this is. She got back to me and she told me it is a vampire. And I'm like, okay, why? And she said, well, he wants to turn your oldest daughter. He said he's come here and he ain't going nowhere. He wants your oldest daughter. So now I'm asking this woman, why is this vampire, if he wants my oldest daughter, why is he biting everybody? except me. He doesn't bite me, but he bites all the adult children. He bites my adult son-in-law. Like, he's careful not to bite my youngest son, which is the minor. And she said, because if he bit Alexis every time he came, he'd kill her. So that's when I got alarmed. I'm like, okay, this is too much. He wasn't only biting my daughters. I didn't know this, but he actually bit my oldest son when we were all in the house together. When I came over, when the vampire got aggressive and just started biting all over my son-in-law's neck, I came over to the house to see the pictures in person, to see his neck in person, and my oldest son happened to be home, or happened to be at my daughter's house from college, and he heard us talking about it. He was like, oh, I've had those bites. He's like, I had them on my arm, and I thought they were unusual, but I just was like, whatever. I thought a bug bit me. I'm like, that'd be a huge bug, Tristan. Why didn't you tell me? He's like, I don't know. He said he's not going anywhere. He's here to stay. He wants her. She called him somehow, and he's not going nowhere until he takes her back with him. That's when I'm like, okay, I call Alexis and say, hey, this vampire said you called him. Did you call on a vampire? Did you summon a vampire? Like, what did you do? And she was like, no, I don't think so. And she explained to me some years back, like when she was a teenager, 4 or 5 years back, she was obsessed with the show True Blood. She was obsessed with vampires, just like they're, like kids are. Like, oh, vampires are sexy. They have powers. And she was obsessed with their powers. And she just really wanted to be able to have vampiric powers. The power to, what they call it, glamorize people, to make them do, say. And just the whole typical teenage thing with vampires. But she didn't call herself calling a vampire. So I was like, okay, Alexis, he said he's not going nowhere, that he wants to turn you and take you back with him. Do you want to go? Like, come on, you brought this on yourself. And she was like, no, I don't want to go. Of course not. I don't want to die and go off, live with some vampire somewhere. I don't know. I might end up in hell somewhere. I want to go to heaven. I want to go with Jesus said. I want to go with God. I don't want to go. I don't know nothing about no vampires. Like, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do this. So that's when I started to pray. I said, God, forgive us. Forgive Alexis. We didn't know, she didn't know what she was wishing for. She just was, glamorized by the show True Blood, and help us. I started to pray, cry out, ask God to intervene, and without fear. Like, I had no fear. None of us really had no fear. My youngest son did. Landon had a little fear. But the rest of us kind of was like, okay, this is another issue we have to deal with. Let's deal with it. So we prayed, and we asked God to intervene, and he did. We haven't had any issues since. No bites, no problems. It took a while for me to share this because, people are weird, and they say they believe what Jesus said, and they say they believe the Bible, but this is my challenge to anyone who say they're a Christian or who say they believe in God. Read, study, and more than the Bible, because I think everyone knows by now the Bible has a lot of things missing from it. There's called the lost books. There's actually books of the Bible that have been taken out of the original version of the Bible. Go read those versions. There's books about Jesus before he was 30. All we know is when he was born and then when he was 30. What happened in between time? There's books out there that talks about that. Go read, study, show yourself approved. And this is my challenge to preachers. Like, it's time for you guys to educate yourselves so you can educate us on what happens under real spiritual warfare. Like, if hell was to break loose on earth today, like what? Pray, and what else? What does it mean to have the whole armor of God? What does it mean to have the fruits of the Spirit? Like, all we hear about is, pay your tithes. Yeah, that's great. You are supposed to pay your tithes, but it's more to church than paying your tithes, and it's more to church than just going and shouting and woo. We need to know. We need some knowledge in these streets, okay? Because it's about to get real out here. I know firsthand.